Welcome back to part 2 of the 8.8 differential rebuild. So I got some parts today to set this thing up, so I'll kind of give you a tutorial of what I got going on here. Pinion bearings, carrier bearings, pinion seal, crush washer or crush sleeve, pinion nut, and carrier shims. Those are what set your backlash. This is what sets the preload between the two bearings. So essentially they face each other, and this goes in the middle, and when you tighten the nut down, it crushes down, and that's how you apply the preload between the two bearings. That's what keeps your pinion from walking in and out into the ring gear. So what I'm going to start by doing is cutting the bearings off, cutting the old bearings off. And they sell a special tool, a clamshell tool that goes underneath both sides and has a plug that goes into the carrier, bolt that runs down, and it'll pull the bearings off. But that's effective like probably 80% of the time, and the other 20% of the time you gotta cut them off anyways, just because sometimes it won't get a bite up underneath the bearing, or it'll just pull the cage off, and then you're chasing all the rollers all over the ground and just makes a mess. So I find it easier just to cut them off anyways. Probably takes about the same amount of time, honestly. And what I do is I just cut at an angle so I don't cut into the case. And sometimes you do cut it, you know, depending on the size of your wheel or whatever. You know, trying to cut at an angle like this, but it won't hurt it. I've never had an issue with any. Never had a bearing become loose and come off or anything like that. Plus, when you cut the bearings, I always keep all my old races and all, and they become a good tool for when you press the new bearings on. Like I already found this one a minute ago. This is my 8.8 carrier bearing race, and it fits perfectly over the case, obviously, because that's what it presses onto. And what you can do is use the press to press it down, or sometimes I just hammer them on, but I have access to a press at work, so if I was doing it on the weekend or something like that, I would just hammer it on, you know, lay a piece of steel across this and just drive the bearing on. But a little bit simpler just to take it to work and use the shop press it right on there. And with it being cut, the press fit has already been removed from the race, so you don't have to worry about the old race getting stuck, especially on the pinion. You know, as you press it down, there's a little bit of a lip there, and sometimes, you know, it would I've actually done it before I tried cutting them, where it was just you know, one that I pulled off with a puller. I just flipped it over and pushed it back on, and it actually started pressing on. I had to tap it back off with a hammer. So I'm going to go ahead and put the carrier and the pinion in a vise, use a cut-off wheel, and cut all the bearings off, get it ready to take to work tomorrow. And as far as the housing goes, you have to knock out the old pinion races. Just use a long punch and a hammer. They come right out, and then I'll clean out the housing, get all the old metal from the race, the old oil, you know, just clean it up. I like working with clean stuff anyways. So I'll do that, and then you need a set of these race installers or seal installers, and you just find the one that fits the race you're trying to drive in, and you just hammer it right on in there nice and square. So go ahead and get started on cutting these bearings off. That'll be step 1. So I got the pinion bearing cut off, and that actually took quite a while. Bearing puller probably would have been much faster on that one. But like I said, sometimes the bearing puller just grabs the cage and you have to cut the race off anyways. There just won't be enough shoulder there for it to get on. But sometimes I just cut the race and you can just hit it with a chisel and you don't even have to cut all the way through the race, which is normally what I try to do, and that's what I achieved on this one. And if you look where the bearing rides right here, not a single cut, no wear on it. Now, I did catch the gear right there. It's not going to hurt anything. It's strictly cosmetic. In some applications, like I believe it's the GM 7.5s, like in Camaros, S10s, Monte Carlos, depending on what carrier it is, there's different series carriers that take a different thickness ring gear, and sometimes you have ring gear spacers. But I've actually had to cut teeth right here, like go in with a cutoff wheel and straight clearance teeth to be able to get the pin back in. That's actually quite common. So rather than time lapse the carrier bearings here, I'm just going to go ahead and cut those off, get this cleaned up, and then I'll film the process of knocking the races out, and so we'll get on that. Alright, so carrier bearings came right off, piece of cake. I wish I would have did a time lapse on them. It would have been like 30 seconds. But as you can see, the wheel got right here and just right there on that corner. I mean, strictly cosmetic. And on the other side, it didn't touch nowhere, just like the pinion, just clean and right on off. But if you're gonna try this, before you cut these off, you want to cram a bunch of rags down in here. If it's an open carrier, it's not that big a deal, but you got clutch plates and steels in there, frictions in there, so you don't want all that metal dust in there. In fact, I don't even clean these. I just throw some brake parts cleaner on the ring gear and wipe it out. That way I can get a pattern on it. But now that I clean it off, I'm seeing like a good deal of rust and pitting on this ring gear. See the carrier right here? It's got a bunch of rust in it, so that tells me that this was sitting somewhere for a long time in atmosphere, because differentials, axle housings are vented, and it's not like this came out of a mud truck or anything. So just atmosphere got into the axle housing itself, and this part, probably from like here to here, was above the oil level, so it starts rusting. That's the only way that can happen. But so we're all good here. We're ready for bearings now. Just got to knock the races out of the housing, clean it out real good, and press the new races in, and we'll be ready to go back together with it. So all you need for this is a long punch and a hammer. If you got steel toes on, you're good to go. That one's out. And they have little cutaways in the housing right here, you know, so you can get a punch on it. That's it. They're out. So now I just get in here. This is a real bad area right here for gunk. That's just straight metal. That's where all that race went. And when the ring and pinion breaks down, that's notorious right there. So I always clean in there, and I'll take like a long extension and pack the axle tube full of rags, ream it out just like the barrel on a rifle, and you know, just clean everything out, wipe everything out, get the new races in, and we'll be good to go. Alright, so I got the housing all cleaned out. I drove the new races in it. Took an angle grinder with like a blue pad or red pad, doesn't really matter. Knocked the existing silicone off the edges, so we get a nice seal when he puts it back together. So I'll just take the carrier and the pinion with me tomorrow. I really have no choice but to reuse the pinion shim. It's got no markings on it. Almost all factory pinion shims will be stamped, whether it be 28, 34, they'll always be stamped. So this is really about the only thing that's concerned me on this rear end, because this is your pinion depth. But since we're reusing the ring and pinion, you know, it's already been broken at this depth, so I have no choice but to reuse it. So go ahead and put that on there. Press the new bearing on. Press a couple carrier bearings. And we should be able to set this thing up tomorrow night. We'll see you then.